Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the NPA Report. We are starting a new series today because we really want to highlight the work of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. And we also want ordinary Americans to know that there are police officers in this country, heroic public servants who are being wrongly prosecuted and wrongly persecuted simply for doing their job. As I travel the country, the number one fear that I hear from police officers, unfortunately, around the United States is not, am I going to get hurt? Not even, am I going to be involved in a lawsuit? It's, am I going to get prosecuted simply for doing my job? So I thought we would bring in the president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, Jason Johnson. And with him today is a law enforcement wife, Sarah DeValkenaere. Her husband, Eric, was involved in one of these, what I'm going to call a malicious prosecution, which Sarah and Jason will further explain. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us on.
So Jason, kick us off. Tell us about Eric's case. Tell us about the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund.
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. The Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for just about 30 years. We'll celebrate our 30th anniversary in August of this year. And our main purpose and the sort of the founding purpose of the organization is to provide legal defense funding for law enforcement officers who have been wrongfully, or in some cases even maliciously, charged with crimes related to their work. Most of our cases, a vast majority of our cases, are criminal cases in which the law enforcement officer is a defendant charged with a crime, and the majority of those cases they're related to a use of force, often a use of deadly force by the law enforcement officer. And so we've been successfully doing that for 30 years. We have, as you might imagine, currently a higher caseload than we've had in our history. Historically, we would carry 1 to 2 cases sort of at a time that we'd be actively fundraising on and funding, providing for the officer's legal defense. Currently, I mean, I sometimes lose track, sadly, of how many cases that we have, but we're currently supporting over 10 law enforcement officers. We have a sort of a waiting list, if you will, of cases that we're reviewing to intake. I anticipate that in the next quarter we'll take on 1 or 2 additional cases. So it's a sad commentary, but unfortunately, business is good for us right now in the sense that we're carrying a lot of cases. We're actually been able to support a significant number of cases financially, which is good news. The bad news is that we have so many cases that we're being called upon to support. As to Eric DeValkenaere's case, this is a case that I became aware of back in 2019 or 2020, probably, is when I first heard of Eric's case, and we originally got involved after Eric was charged with manslaughter and armed criminal action in Missouri. So I'll describe the sort of briefly as I can. It's sort of a complicated case, but I'll do my best to summarize how we got here. So Eric, first of all, let me talk briefly about Eric. He's was a 20-year veteran of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, married to Sarah, 3 kids. A great guy, and Sarah will talk more about Eric. I got a chance to meet him along the way. I've spoken with him a few times, and and beyond that, I've gotten to learn about him in a number of different ways. And I mean, just a fantastic guy, a family man, but dedicated to his career. His dad was a career Kansas City police officer, and many other family members in law enforcement and public service, and an excellent police officer, and it had been identified as such many times over throughout his career, had a variety of assignments that really demonstrated the trust and confidence that the police department leadership had in Eric and his judgment. So I'm sure it came as a big surprise that as a result of a 2019 case in which Eric was forced to use deadly force against an armed individual that threatened his partner, Eric did use deadly force, and unfortunately Cameron Lamb, who was the individual who was armed that Eric was dealing with, did die as a result of that. And that resulted eventually in manslaughter charges against Eric. This is a case, Betsy, that we see at the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. We see a lot of these cases. I mean, a lot of people seek our funding. We don't fund every case that we see. Certainly, we believe in every case that we accept. We believe very much in the officer that was involved, or we wouldn't accept the case. But I have to put Eric's case even above most of those. I mean, this case is an absolute travesty of justice. Put an underline under that. Put it in bold. Absolute travesty of justice. And every single individual that's been involved in the system, from the prosecutor to the trial court to the appellate courts, everyone has participated in this travesty of justice. And I don't say those kinds of things lightly. I'm not a bomb thrower. I'm just looking at the facts of the case, and I'm seeing what happened. And this is exactly the type of case that really gets our juices going here at the LELDF. And we really do need help to right this wrong.
So how did Eric, and I've read about him as well. How did his use of deadly force put him in prison?
Well, it's interesting, Betsy, because this is a case where you heard I said earlier that Lamb was armed. I mean, all of the evidence supports that Lamb was armed with a .45 caliber pistol. One was recovered from the scene. It had been previously reported stolen. It had Lamb's DNA on it. It was loaded with .45 caliber ammunition, and matching ammunition was found elsewhere in Lamb's garage. There just isn't a lot of question about it. There was some speculation early on that the prosecution was going to try to allege that police actually planted the gun. Absolutely nothing to that. Zero merit to that. And so no evidence of that was presented at trial. The trial court actually relied on something that frankly, I think it blew most of us away. It was completely unexpected that the trial court actually used the Fourth Amendment as a way of convicting Eric. The trial court felt that the entry into, and we probably didn't have time to go into all the nitty gritty about the origin of this case, but it's essential, I guess, to talk about how the trial court arrived at their conclusion is that Eric and another officer named Troy Schwalm were responding to some information that Cameron Lamb had been weaving in and out of traffic and running red lights and cutting people off and just doing all sorts of dangerous things. Turns out the reason that Lamb was doing that is he had just assaulted his girlfriend and was chasing her through traffic. The officers knew nothing about what exactly had transpired. All they knew was the information I just gave you that was reported to them from a police helicopter. They tracked Lamb back to the home, and they they walked into the backyard to encounter Lamb to investigate what had happened. They certainly had probable cause that Lamb had committed a number of violations, and reasonable suspicion that there was something more to it than just traffic violations. And in fact, there was more to it, as I just said. In an effort to investigate that, Eric and his partner entered the backyard, encountered Lamb. Eric sees Lamb pull a handgun out, challenges him, sees Lamb go to point the gun toward his partner, and then is forced to use deadly force. But the court arrived at the conclusion that the officer's entry into Lamb's backyard was in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And because of that, they said that they didn't have the privilege to use self-defense, even in the face of deadly force that was presumably going to be used by Lamb. And so it's very unusual in that regard that a court would arrive at that conclusion. It's contrary to decades of Supreme Court precedent on Fourth Amendment, on curtilage of the home, privilege to use deadly force. All these things were argued all the way up the judiciary of Missouri, all the way up to the appellate court, to no avail. And that's why I take the strong, that's why I say things like every part of the system that has touched this case, we have no explanation for the result.
So Sarah, I want to bring you in. You're a cop's wife. I'm a cop's wife. And you're always kind of waiting for that phone call, right? That, oh, honey, it's me. I'm going to be a little late getting home because I got involved in a shooting. I'm sure your initial reaction, of course, was, thank God he's okay, right? That's always our initial reaction. had somebody point a gun at him or his partner, he did what he had to do, what we all knew we had to do. And you know, that initial fright, but then I'm guessing you must think, okay, well, you know, you're worried about things like his mental health and maybe a lawsuit and when does he get to go back to work and things like that. But this turned into a whole other extraordinary situation, didn't it?
It definitely did. One that, as a police wife, I'll be honest with you, I never even considered this happening. You do worry about them going to work and, like you said, getting that phone call of something happening. And I was at school the day that this happened. I remember him calling me at school and just saying, hey, I want you to know I'm okay. But like you said, I've been involved in a police shooting. I'm going to be late getting home. If you see this on the news, I just want, it's important to you know that I know that you're okay. I mean, that I'm okay. And I was, you know, thankful for that. And then, yeah, I remember him coming home that night and just holding him in my arms. As it's a devastating thing. No police officer that I have ever met wants to be put in a situation where they are forced to use deadly force. You know, I am a kindergarten teacher, so unlike you, I'm not put in, I make a ton of decisions every single day, but none of them are life and death. And officers and my husband was put in a position where within seconds, he did have to make a decision, and he did rely on his training, and he did what he had to do. And I firmly believe that any good officer would have reacted the exact same way, because as terrible as what we're going through and what our family is going through right now is beyond hard. There really are no words for it. I know Eric, like we said, I've been with him since he was 18 years old. If he had not reacted and relied on his training, and Troy Schramm would have been shot, Eric would have been beyond devastated.
So talk about what that was like when this went from, you know, a standard police shooting, you know, he's put on leave, things like that, to this prosecutorial nightmare that you're still living today.
Yeah, I mean, I believed so much, and so did Eric, in the judicial system and that this would work. The shooting happened in December of 2019. And as you know, we had some very big events in our country that happened revolving police and different things. And he actually was indicted, I think, in the summer of 2020. So not long after that, which you'll never convince me that that did not play a role in it, that our prosecutor in Jackson County, it was an election year, she was going after that because of what it was and what had just happened in the country and all the national media that was around it. I think she was, you know, making a name for herself. And it's unfortunate because, you know, Eric had already been cleared. The department had looked in this. This was a, you know, I don't want to say the word good shooting, but he did the right thing. And for her to charge him, I just kept thinking, okay, people were like, he'll never be indicted. Okay, well, now he'll go to court. They'll do the right thing there. So we just, you know, I had to, you know, pray and just think, okay, this will be corrected at the trial level. They will see that this was something he had to do. He's innocent. And I just remember that day. I mean, I was just blown away. We were not prepared for that at all. I mean, worst day of our lives that you know, that he was convicted. And then, when we were, of course, going to appeal, luckily Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund continued to stand by us and continue to say, this is wrong. We are fighting this. We're going to continue to fight it through the appellate levels. And unfortunately, we had a bench trial, which I don't know. Some people, I think, still think that we had a jury trial. We did go with a bench trial at the time. You know, it didn't go our way. And it's just, like he said, it's a really travesty. It's a miscarriage of justice like I had just never seen in Missouri before, ever. It is terrible.
Now, you have 3 children. How do you explain this whole thing?
It was really hard. The kids did not attend trial with us. I did not feel that that was appropriate, even though they were a little bit older. I did not feel that that was appropriate. Our oldest son did come home from college, and he was there on the day that he was convicted. And it was, you know, terrible. He did end up, our oldest son spoke at the sentencing as well, in addition to myself and some other officers. But I remember my youngest son coming home from school that day. And of course, the verdict came out during the day. He had practice after school. We didn't want to like pull him out of school and upset him. So he walked in, and I just remember being at the home. And it's one of the most heartbreaking moments. But how'd it go today, Dad? Did it go okay? And we had to break the news that no, it didn't. And that just the two of them really crying and holding each other was terrible. And then we just explained, we're going to fight this. We know who we are. And that's, I guess that's the great thing with Eric and I being together since we were 18 and 19. I know who Eric is, and he is a incredible man. I know who I am. Our kids know who we are, and we are going to hold our heads high, and we're going to fight this as long as we need to. And your dad is an amazing man. You are amazing kids, and hold your heads high because we're going to fight.
Jason, what did the appellate court say about this case?
Well, one of the among the many disappointments along the way in this case, and I think certainly the first major disappointment was that Eric was indicted, and then the second was that the trial court, which, as Sarah said, Eric elected to have a bench trial because judges are supposed to be, impervious to public pressure, and they're supposed to look at the law and the facts. And when law enforcement in states that allow the defendant to choose a bench trial over a jury trial, commonly when law enforcement officers are charged with crimes, situations like this, where they're charged with a crime, they do choose a bench trial because they want to have a finder of fact that is sort of immune from public pressure or being misled by media reports and things like that. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in this case. I think there was a lot of pressure on the trial judge, and that's resulted in this unusual ruling based on the Fourth Amendment, which we believed, as disappointing as it was, was enough that we could almost guarantee that the appellate courts would overturn it because it was completely wrong. But the appellate courts were not receptive at all. In fact, I attended the hearing, the hearing on Eric's appeal, in which his appellate attorney presented very coherent legal arguments that, if you hand them out to objective legal scholars around the country, they would come down on Eric's favor. It was just that clear cut, but the court was not at all receptive to the arguments. They rejected them without really even addressing. There were major legal points in Eric's brief that weren't addressed at all in the appellate court opinion. And it was just very disappointing because it gives the appearance that the justice system, and I don't like to use the word rigged, but it did not appear to be an objective, professional due process that Eric was entitled to. And unfortunately, he sits in jail now because of that. And so, yeah, the Court of Appeals process was another disappointment. And then the latest disappointment was that the Missouri Supreme Court refused to accept transfer, which would have allowed them to review the case, and they declined to do that. So we're at a place now where Eric's legal options are very, very limited. And so our current hope, our current prayer, all of the effort that we're putting into this case at this time is to prevail upon the governor of Missouri, Mike Parson, who's a former sheriff, his track record of being pro-law enforcement, obviously, and his term ends at the end of this year. He's not seeking re-election, and we're just hoping and praying that the governor will reflect upon this case. He's aware of the case, very well aware of the case, and that he will make the right decision and grant either a full pardon or at least commute Eric's sentence.
I think it was important to note too, I know Andrew Bailey, who's the Missouri Attorney General, they also submitted a brief during the appeals process, in addition to our own appellate attorney requesting that it be either overturned or a new trial ordered. And that does not happen very often either. So we also had the support of the Missouri Attorney General. And in the appellate system, they also did let the original prosecutor, so the Jackson County prosecutor, was also let back in to write I believe, is it an amicus brief? I'm not exactly sure, but they were allowed back into that appellate process, which I remember being told originally that would not happen. So I feel that that was also, kind of unfortunate and kind of an unfair thing that happened in our case as well.
I'll tell you guys, Sarah, where can people follow you on social media to keep up with this case?
Well, I am on Facebook under my name, Sarah DeValkenaere, and you can find me there. I'm also on Twitter. I think it's at SDRSDD, and it's my name, Sarah DeValkenaere, on there as well. I continue to post about Eric on both of those platforms.
And can people write to the Missouri governor to encourage him to pardon Eric?
Absolutely. If you just type in, Missouri Governor Mike Parson, it leads you to his site. There's a phone number and also an online form that you can fill out. The Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund also has been sending out petitions, and I know we have thousands of signatures on those. Liberty Alliance, which is another group here in Missouri, they have also backed Eric and are getting signatures on that. So I will say the one thing that is a blessing is the amount of support that Eric and I have is really good. But I also think that that goes to show you, how important this case is. And yes, it's hurting my family, us, but it is hurting our Blue family, law enforcement all over the state of Missouri, our KCPD family, in addition to other, departments across the state. And quite frankly, nationally, I would assume this is not good for law enforcement in general. This case is not.
No, you're absolutely right. And Jason, where can people find more about the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund?
We have lots of information on our website that we keep updated all the time. It's policedefense.org, policedefense.org. And we're really active on social media as well. Our handle on Twitter/X, Facebook, Instagram, it's at LELDF is where you can find us.
Guys, I can't thank you enough for being with us today. And I encourage every one of our viewers to look at Eric's case and to see what you can do to support the righting this terrible, terrible wrong. And if you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Are you passionate about supporting law enforcement? The National Police Association is on a mission to strengthen our communities, protect our families, and ensure justice prevails. But they need your help. Every dollar you donate makes a difference. It funds the legal defense of police officers and police agencies, supports advocacy for pro-law enforcement legislation, and funds community outreach programs and education. Imagine safer streets, stronger bonds between officers and neighborhoods, and a brighter future for all. Join us. Visit our website at nationalpolice.org to donate today.